Hey YouTube, what's up? Welcome back to Fantasy Football Profits. As always, we thank you guys so much for being here. I'm very excited, as always, to bring you guys a video. As you can tell from the title you clicked on this video, big names with big concerns. Basically, we're just going to talk about some big name players, guys like Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Ezekiel Elliott, Julio Jones, guys who are going typically in the first and second rounds, and we're just going to discuss some concerns with them. Now, I want to be very clear that I'm not saying avoid these players. I'm not saying don't draft these guys, but basically, the point of this video is that I found myself in the past, and I hope I'm not the only one, I don't imagine that I am, who's in the first and the second round, especially the first round, and just thinks, you know, there's a lot of talent out here. I mean, any one of these guys is a fine option. How do you separate elite talent from elite talent? Well, we're going to nitpick, and I hate to be that sort of guy. I hate people who do that, but you have to look at the fine details to separate the best of the best from just the best, as they say. So I think a lot of people really underestimate their first round picks. I think a lot of people think if I have the fourth pick overall, I'm going to get the fourth overall talent or the fifth overall. It really doesn't matter, does it? I can't miss. Well, I would say yes, you can if you take a kicker or a defense, but you can also miss in little ways. For example, last year in standard leagues, Todd Gurley scored, I believe it was 68 more points than the next guy on the list as far as fantasy running backs goes. So if you had the first overall pick and you took the second best running back, you'd think that goes pretty well. That's a pretty solid pick. It's hard to get the number one overall running back, but that means you missed out on 68 points. So those picks definitely matter. But we'll get more into it and what it means with each player individually. Before we get into that, of course, we've got to cover a few things. And first is this awesome thing right here. Just got this package in the mail the other day from our friends at the Fantasy Bros. So if you go and look down in our description, you'll see a link that says Fantasy Draft Kit. We're partnering with this company, I believe from New York, who is selling these draft kits. We're not just doing it because it makes us money, although it does. If you use that link, we'll make some money off of it, which we really appreciate. But we're also doing it because we try to bring as much to you guys as we can. We want to offer you things that currently we're not offering. We're constantly trying to improve, and that's one way that we can do it. Those are insanely nice draft kits. Now, in the next week or so, we're going to make a video and talk about them. We'll show you everything. But those are fantastic. They're reusable, great stickers. It's awesome. Best draft kit that we have ever used, so we're excited to have it for this season. But we'll move on. That's not necessarily for this video. Of course, check out our Facebook and our Instagram. We're posting stuff on there, guys, every single day, and it's stuff that isn't in these videos, ranking top 10 red zone running backs, top 10 red zone wide receivers, all sorts of other things, as well as in-depth breakdown of just individual players and many other things. So make sure to check that out. Plus, lots of great discussion going on, putting polls on there. There's nothing more excited than when we build a community of people who are just communicating and stating their opinions, and we have a lot of fun talking fantasy. So join us on Instagram, join us on Facebook, and let people know your opinion. Get info back from other average fantasy football players, and not just us, because you guys know we love to answer you in the comments below. Continue to do that, but this is not the only place that you have to do that. So let's quit wasting time now. We'll just get right into it. We're going to talk about three quarterbacks: Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, and Kirk Cousins. We'll start off with Tom Brady. Of course, age is a concern. I have some other concerns that I'll mention, but we'll just start with age. He is, I believe, an August birthday, so he'll be 41 years old when the season is going on. That's a major concern when we look back at 41-year-old quarterbacks. Historically, they haven't been very good. The best season ever had by a 41-year-old quarterback was in 1997. Warren Moon threw for 25 touchdowns and 3,600 yards. That's a pretty good year for a 41-year-old quarterback. In fact, that was far better than I was expecting. And yet, if you drafted Tom Brady, 25 touchdowns and 3,600 yards would be a bit of a disappointment. We look at other years. Brett Favre only threw 11 touchdowns, 2,500 yards. Doug Flutie threw 1,000 yards and 9 TDs. Vinny Testaverde threw 3,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. Those are the best years that I could find from 41-year-old quarterbacks, so it is a major concern for me. However, it's not my biggest concern for him. Tom Brady hasn't showed any signs of aging whatsoever. Here are my two concerns that really bother me. One of the reasons that he's been able to age pretty well and stay healthy in the NFL is that offensive line has been phenomenal. That really helps his fantasy play every single season. And he just lost one of his tackles, Nate Soldier, to the New York Giants. So that's a concern for me. Takes a huge hit right there. Offers a lot of experience and from the past, from the many years he has played for them. So that's a bit of a concern. But honestly, the biggest concern is the weapons. Julian Edelman with a suspension is his best wide receiver. After that, it really falls off. Maybe Kenny Britt can step in and do something, but he's had an extremely on and off career. Looked like he showed potential, but it's never really stepped out. I mean, his best option is Rob Gronkowski, and don't get me wrong, Rob Gronkowski is a great option, but he's also a guy who could go down hurt and not play the entire season. I mean, that's just what you're getting with a guy who's so injury prone. So those are kind of my three concerns. I do wonder how he's going to play this year. I still think he's a very good fantasy quarterback, but I'm going to bump him out of the first tier. I'm going to take him after I take Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, those sort of guys. Then I'm going to take Tom Brady. That's that. Here's the thing, though, guys. If you're following our advice, you're taking quarterbacks later, you're waiting, you're understanding how much value there is at quarterback position, how deep the quarterback position is, and you're not going to take Tom Brady. It shouldn't matter to you because he's ranked simply too highly, and somebody will take him before you if you follow our strategy and wait. Now we'll move on. I'm going to talk about Kirk Cousins. Simply for me, Kirk Cousins, it's not the weapons around him. It's not his talent that concerns me. It's whether or not he's going to be throwing the ball enough. It's going to have enough opportunities. Simply, that team is not built for an effective fantasy quarterback. The Vikings had the best overall defense last year and had the best overall defense in many categories. On top of that, they add Mike Hughes and Sheldon Richardson. Mike Hughes looks like he's going to be a great addition to the one weakness there. They had a little bit of corner weakness through just a couple of games throughout the season. And Sheldon Richardson should be great on the defensive line. He's been great for years now. On top of that, the running game is so effective. Last year before getting hurt, Dalvin Cook was third overall in combined yards through the first 4 games. So through a quarter of the season, he was the third best running back in the NFL as far as yards. And then Latavius Murray. He goes out, and despite the fact that through the first 4 games he wasn't the #1 running back, and even after that he was competing with Jerick McKinnon, he still gets the 4th most rushing attempts in the red zone and does quite a bit with it, 128 yards and 7 touchdowns. I mean, you've got a bruiser, you've got a quick back. Now, granted, Cook is good at receiving out of the backfield. Kyle Rudolph is a nice red zone, big tight end, and Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs are fairly good options. In fact, they're very good options. But I just have a feeling the coaching staff isn't going to let Kirk Cousins be the sort of quarterback that a lot of fantasy owners are going to want him to be. So I'm going to steer clear of him for that reason. He's still a top 12 quarterback, probably maybe a top 10, somewhere floating around that range. But just simply avoid him a little bit. Don't take him too early. Don't reach on him. We took a poll on Facebook and on our Instagram and asked people if they thought he could be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this year. And I was surprised to see how many people said yes. So I guess that's just a warning to you guys. He's just simply not going to throw the ball enough unless something major changes. I could be wrong, but there's nothing that says that will be the case. We'll move on now to Russell Wilson. Biggest concern for Russell Wilson, he's basically the only guy there. Russell Wilson is of all the quarterbacks in the NFL, he is the best combination between athleticism with his legs and great throwing ability. He is phenomenal. But he's not working with a lot. Other than Doug Baldwin, what does he have? He just lost Jimmy Graham and Paul Richardson. Last year they combined for 178 targets, 1,200 yards, and 16 touchdowns. And the Seattle Seahawks, we're not going to replace them at all. So I'm not really sure what to say about that. On top of that, he has an extremely tough schedule. Plays some really, really difficult pass defenses. I was just talking with, I was doing the research for this video yesterday, and somebody left a comment. I was tired of doing the research. I got up and I left, and I wanted to thank Dylan Vergara. I'm not sure how to say it. I apologize. You can yell at me in the comments, but I quit to go answer some comments, and they actually left this comment about a concern for Doug Baldwin. I figured I'd throw it in for Russell Wilson, but anyways, thank you, Dylan. I always appreciate talking with you. Here are the cornerbacks that Russell Wilson's going to be facing. Chris Harris Jr., Aqib Talib twice, Patrick Peterson twice, Darius Slay, Casey Hayward, Jason Verrett, Xavier Rhodes, and Richard Sherman twice. basically 8 to 10 games out of the season, is going to be facing some very difficult pass defenses with very, very little weapons. So if he's going to have a good fantasy season, Russell Wilson's got to do it with his legs. So for me, I got to bump him below. I really want to put him number 1. He's so athletic, but I got to put Carson Wentz. I got to put Aaron Rodgers ahead of him. In fact, for me, Aaron Rodgers is hands down number 1. But just a major concern there because of that. Now we'll move on and talk about our 3 running backs. All right, so first off, we'll start and we'll talk about Ezekiel Elliott. A lot of people, I put up a poll the other day and asked which 4 guys you would want. And it was Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, David Johnson, and was it Ezekiel? I believe it was Ezekiel, yes. And sorry, I forget sometimes. And a lot of people said that they would take Ezekiel Elliott over all those other guys. And of course, I would love to hear from you guys. Tell me why. A lot of people just said, I'll take Elliott. And I said why and didn't really get many answers. But I have a lot of concerns for him this year. I think he's a very, very talented back. He might be the best pure rusher in the NFL as far as his capability to run goes. But here are my concerns. His rookie year, he had a yards per carry of 5.1, which is phenomenal. It dropped to a terrible 4.1 yards per carry, simply not getting it done. He only averages 29 receptions per season. A lot of people say, well, the passing game was terrible last year. That's not his fault. And that may be true, but is the passing game in Dallas supposed to get any better after they lose Dez Bryant and Jason Witten to replace them with Hearns and Gallup? I'm sorry, but I don't think it's going to be any better. Things aren't looking up. When I look at the Dallas Cowboys offense, if I'm a defense, all I have to do is stop Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, that's really all I have to do. You look back at his rookie season, Dak Prescott was great, but he wasn't great last year. He seriously struggled. And you don't have to absolutely destroy that offense. You just slow down the passing game, shut down Elliott. I mean, really, there's nothing there to me that says, oh, I should be worried about anyone else. On top of that, he doesn't get it done in the passing game. You want to consider him an elite running back and compare him to guys like Le'Veon Bell, even though he only got 29 receptions last year and Bell had 85. I mean, for me, he just doesn't quite make the cut. I still think he's a first-round pick, but at running back position, I'm taking guys like Kareem Hunt ahead of him. I'm bumping him down to like 7 or 8 because I think there's a lot working against him. Another guy is Dalvin Cook. I'm a Minnesota fan, and I love to get hype on Dalvin Cook. I think he's a very talented back, and he brings a lot to the team, especially after Jerick McKinnon now is leaving. But there's some concerns. He's not a physical runner. If you watch his game film from last year, he only played 4 games, but he seriously struggled when running it up the middle. He's more of a bounce it outside kind of guy. Really struggles to push through contact, things like that. That doesn't sound like a very big deal, but I think that it is. First of all, because he wasn't as good in the receiving game as many people expected him to be. I think he was on pace for 44 catches, which is okay. Of course, it's better. We just talked about Elliott's 29 is quite bad. 44 is okay, but it's not great if that's what you do primarily. On top of that, I think you'll lose a lot of carries to Le'Veon Bell, to Latavius Murray, I apologize, who last year ranked 4th in red zone rushing attempts with 48. I talked about with this Kirk Cousins, he had 48 red zone rushing attempts and 7 touchdowns. That's extremely effective, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dalvin Cook lost a lot of effective carries because of that. When you look at running backs, the majority of their touchdowns come inside the red zone, inside the 10, inside the 5-yard line even. And you know what? If I'm the Minnesota Vikings at the 5-yard line, at the 2-yard line, I don't want Cook in there. I don't want to run it with him. He's just not physical enough. I'm going to put Latavius Murray in, and I think he's going to do a better job. That doesn't mean all the carries are going to go to Latavius Murray, but enough that I think Cook is going to take a serious hit in his fantasy value because of it. All right, so the last running back I want to talk about is Leonard Fournette. He came out last year, and man, people were excited, and he is such a big physical back. Love the guy. I got very excited about him, but sure enough, the concerns that people had with him were true. He struggled to stay healthy, only played 13 games, and even played some of those games banged up and struggled a little bit because of it, despite that his stats were great, except for his yards per carry at an awful 3.9. That scares me as a fantasy owner, and I really don't want to touch him because of that. Just like with Ezekiel Elliott, a lot of people would say, well, passing game was struggling. But another situation of, do you expect it to get better? They lost Robinson and Hearns, and they've decided to stick probably the worst decision I've seen ever since I've started watching football that they decided to stick with Blake Bortles as their quarterback. He has a career quarterback rating of 44.2. Just like with Elliott, and maybe even to a further degree, if I'm playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm going to shut down the run. I'm going to focus on Fournette. Especially with that being the case, I wouldn't be surprised if he seriously struggled with injuries this year. He only played 13 games last year. He has a career history of seriously struggling, so just some major concerns there. Stay away from the guy. I don't imagine he'll be extremely efficient. He may get some stats from bulk, but the more bulk, the more likely he will to get hurt. So I got to bump him down below guys like Cook on the list and other guys I think that people are trying to compare him to that I don't think he can quite compete with. Let's move on to the wide receivers now. All right, so now we'll talk about wide receivers. We're going to talk about T.Y. Hilton, Brandon Cooks, and Julio Jones. We'll start with Julio Jones. What's the obvious concern? Guys, I'm not going to surprise you. You smart people, I know you are. The touchdowns. But I think a lot of people would shock to see the extent that his touchdowns are a concern. I've looked at a lot of other fantasy sites because I like to compare ourselves to them, see where other people are being drafted or things like that, especially for finding ADP. It's very interesting. I'm basically just obsessive. It's what I do at night for fun. Look at why I think other sites are wrong and why I'm right. It's my joy in life or something. But anyways, a lot of people have Julio Jones ranked in the top 5 in most leagues. Now, that's too much of a stretch. Throughout his career, he's only averaged 6 touchdowns a season. Last year, had he gotten 6 touchdowns, which he didn't, 25 receivers had 7 or more. So he would have ranked 26th, which is terrible. But it gets even worse because last year he only had 3 receiving touchdowns. That would have had him tied for 71st in the NFL. And yet many fantasy sites are ranking him as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. Now, I completely, fully expect him to bounce back. 5 or 6 touchdowns this year? Sure, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be surprised if he had another year with 3, to be honest with you. But like I said, 25 receivers had 7 or more TDs, so 25 receivers did better than him. Now, he has far more value in a PPR league. In a PPR league, if he gets 6 touchdowns, he's easily top 15, yes. But in a standard league, if he gets 6 touchdowns, no, not even close. In fact, does he even crack the top 20? Maybe because of the yards, but that's iffy. It's time to be concerned about Julio Jones, guys. I know everyone wants to brag about him. Every year they bring out the NFL's top 100 ratings, and Julio Jones has these really high ranks, and everybody loves him. I'm sure he's a great guy, but as a fantasy option, he just doesn't get in the end zone enough. He relies too much on catches and yards, and he never has. He's played in the NFL long enough to know that that's probably never going to change. I don't all of a sudden see him coming out this season and getting 12 receiving touchdowns, which he would need to hop up there in the top 2 or 3 like a lot of people used to have him ranked. But that's obvious. Julio Jones, just bump him down out of that top tier, guys. Draft him more around Mike Evans' range, okay? Here's T.Y. Hilton. Right now, I'm surprised to see that his ADP is 13th. And I wanted to bring this up because the 13th best receiver. Do you guys really expect him to do that? Last year, he didn't even break 1,000 yards receiving, which for 13th receiver, you have to get at least 1,000 yards, especially when yardage is your thing. T.Y. Hilton is a big playmaker. He doesn't get a lot of touchdowns, and he doesn't even get a lot of catches. So, he has to get a lot of yards. Now, I'm not trashing the guy. He had a terrible quarterback situation, and I'm not even saying it's his fault. But what I am saying is that quarterback situation going to change this year? No. I think we're looking at the same situation with Andrew Luck that we have since last year. Last year, everyone got excited. Oh, Andrew Luck's coming back. He's going to be so great. And then they were surprised when he didn't. And they're doing the same thing this year. Andrew Luck is going to be back. Andrew Luck is going to be great. He's going to turn that team around. Oh, my gosh, Andrew Luck is throwing a football again. Well, one thing to note is he started throwing a football again, yes, but it was actually an extra light football because a regular weighted football was actually putting strain on him, on his muscles. And so that's a major concern. Another major concern is just as a player, do you even want to have a guy who's as inconsistent as T.Y. Hilton? Over a 12-game span last year, he had only 361 yards. That means for 12 straight games, he averaged just 30 yards. Just 30 yards in 12 games. That basically disappeared, especially from a guy who isn't a big touchdown guy, isn't a big reception guy. Now we'll talk about Brandon Cooks. Quite simply, 2 things that make me nervous. He's played for 3 teams in 3 years. Why isn't he sticking around? Why don't teams find him that valuable? Why don't they want him to stay? and the team that he just landed on. I mean, he's the fourth option at best here. Todd Gurley, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods. Brandon Cooks is the fourth option there, and that's a big problem. Last year they combined for 267 targets, 2,400 yards, and 16 TDs. On top of how effective Gurley is in the running game and the improvements to that defense, I know that Brandon Cooks is going to come in and they're going to use him. He is a big, deep ball guy and he'll get some stats. But a lot of people are getting really hyped on Brandon Cooks when he's just a role player. He may have a few occasional big weeks. If Woods gets hurt, if Cooper Kupp gets hurt, if Todd Gurley gets hurt, yeah, then he definitely has a lot more value. But until something like that happens, I'm just worried. Again, 3 teams in 3 years. The Saints had him, moved on from him, and for a year didn't have any second wideout because of it, and they were just fine with letting him go. The Patriots, look at what the Patriots wide receiver situation looks like, and even they didn't want to bring him back. I know that people are excited about him, but just temper your expectations, guys. So that's what I got to say about him. We'll move on now and talk about the tight ends. All right, so let's roll through these tight ends pretty quickly here. We'll start off with Rob Gronkowski, then Delanie Walker, and then Jimmy Graham. My concerns with Rob Gronkowski are pretty obvious. It's his health. Since 2012, he has played 70 of 96 games. Now, when I did the research on that 70 of 96, I thought he missed more games than that. But that actually comes out to 72% of games, which seems all right. But that's only 11 games a season. 11.6 games per season. Now, his 16-game average, or basically his whole season average when he's healthy, 74 catches, 1,100 yards, and 12 TDs. That's really, really good, but those numbers come down quite a bit. If he only plays 11.6 games, he gets 53 catches, 821 yards, and 8 TDs. Those numbers are still fair. They're not bad, but I see a lot of people reaching to take Rob Gronkowski way earlier than all other tight ends. People take him in the first and then the second round, sometimes even. Now, I'm a big proponent of taking tight ends early, but the concern with his health for me makes me want to take Kelsey earlier than him, or at least around the same time. Here's the thing that I have to say. It also concerns me that the New England Patriots shopped him this offseason. They looked at trading him to the 49ers, to the Lions, I believe it was 4 teams. So it does leave me curious as to what they see in him, why they're concerned. But I think another thing to note with him, and sorry, I guess I'm being kind of awkward, is that what he averages playing 72% of games, it's very likely as he's another year older that he could miss a whole season, or he could miss half a season, or he could miss 3/4 of a season. Like with him, I honestly don't know if he's going to play for me, and so that's a major concern. Now, because he's so effective, in fact, his 16-game average is how he's played throughout the NFL, puts him hands down the best tight end of all time when he plays. It's insane. You can watch some of our other videos, our tight ends video like that, just to see just the enormous stats, how he just crushes every other tight end in touchdowns and yards. But you can't really bump him down because he's so effective. You can't take him after Zach Ertz, right? So I'm just going to say, take him wherever you want to take him, but know you're gambling. Are you a risk taker? If you're in a keeper league and you're drafting and you're looking for that one last key component to push you over the edge, Gronkowski might be the guy. But if you're rebuilding, he's probably not. So we'll move on now and talk about Delanie Walker. I saw a site, a couple of sites actually, it was 2, talk about Delanie Walker as a sleeper at tight end, and this just shocked me. His career average, he only averages 5 touchdowns a season, which just isn't pretty. It's not great at all. In fact, last year he struggled even more because of his age. He only had 3 touchdowns. He's going to be 34 years old this year, Delanie Walker is, and 34-year-old tight ends just struggle. First of all, it's not like Tom Brady. When I talked about Tom Brady's age, I said the age hasn't seemed to wear on him at all. It's worn on Walker. He's gotten slow. He's lost a step. He struggled last year. He struggled slowly over the years more and more. And he's not the only one. Dallas Clark, when he was 34, only had 3 touchdowns. Jason Witten only had 3 touchdowns when he was 34. And Shannon Sharp only had 3 touchdowns when he was 34. 34-year-old tight ends struggle, and Delanie Walker is no difference. For me, he's going like 8 to 10 range. That's where I put him. And then finally, Jimmy Graham. A lot of people are extremely excited about Jimmy Graham, and I understand it. A new big name player to a new big name place. But we got to talk about it. Tight ends just don't do well in Green Bay. I'm not bashing Green Bay. If you're a Green Bay fan, this isn't a negative. Aaron Rodgers doesn't throw to his tight ends that much. And Mike McCarthy, because of that, he knows it. He's a smart coach. He's a good coach. So he just doesn't use tight ends that much. They brought in Jimmy Graham for whatever reason, but they brought in a tight end 3 years in a row. They brought in Jared Cook, who had 30 receptions, 377 yards, and only 1 touchdown in 2016. 2017, they brought in Martellus Bennett, 24 catches, 233 yards, and 0 touchdowns. The fact of the matter is, tight ends struggle in Green Bay. On top of that, it's not just because Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to throw to him. This year, much like many years in the past, there are a plethora of weapons. Adams, Cobb, Montgomery, Geronimo Allison, Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones. I mean, it's insane. So I think that you got to stay away from him. A lot of people are very excited about him. Some sites have him as sleeper. Some guys think he's going to break out. But really just this age, Jimmy Graham has been wearing down and slowly getting less and less yards and catches every year. The fact that he was able to have 10 or 11 touchdowns last year was simply due to, well, what do we talk about? I talked about Russell Wilson. He had no options. And Jimmy Graham is still a big guy. When you have no options, do you throw to your wideout against the number 1 corner or a big tight end against some linebacker or some corner or some safety? Well, it's still a mismatch. He might not be the tight end he used to be, but why not? Aaron Rodgers isn't that way. He doesn't want to throw to his tight ends. He refuses to practically, and he does have options. If Devontae Adams is covered, he'll go to Cobb. If Cobb is covered, he'll go to Montgomery. If Montgomery's covered, he'll go to Geronimo Allison. He'll go to Jamal Williams. He'll run it with Aaron Jones. He's got plenty of options, guys. And so stay away from Jimmy Graham. He'll definitely crack the top 12 and be starting on someone's lineup this year, but I'm not really sure where. Definitely low, one of the last half, probably that 8 to 12 range. Well, as always, guys, we thank you so much. Do me a favor, let me know which picks you think were bad that you didn't like. Let me know which picks you like, and tell me some big names with big concerns that you have, because I'm interested to see some other guys. These were not the only guys. I want to see if you were thinking about some other players that I possibly was thinking about talking about, but decided not to because I only have so much time and it takes so much research to do this video, especially when I have to do all the talking by myself. As always, we thank you guys so much. Have a great day and God bless.